I'll start with that morning, which seemed like the most ordinary morning in the world, but in fact was the beginning of my personal nightmare. It was the morning when, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like yelling, getting nervous, or even thinking about school. Surprisingly, I was in a good mood. I was happy, the kind of happiness you only feel before winter break. I was 13 and I knew how to appreciate simple things. Sleeping until 9, not hearing teachers yell, not writing tests, and not dragging a heavy backpack through a frosty alley that always seemed longer than it actually was. I lay in bed, listening to the snow crunching under the wheels of cars outside the window, and thought, this is so cool. I managed to imagine how today I would go sledding with my friends, or at least just lie around at home, watching cartoons and drinking cocoa. But the fairy tale came to an end. The door to my room burst open. "Get up, sweetie," my mother said gently. She smiled, and her smile was still familiar, warm, and homely. I stirred and barely smiled back at her. "Mom, this vacation," I mumbled, covering my head with a pillow. "Vacation is vacation, but we have things to do," she said and gently tugged at my blanket. "Don't be lazy. Today we're going to our relative's wedding." I opened my eyes so abruptly that I even scared myself. "What wedding?" I groaned. "Mom." "Well, I'm on vacation. Can I at least have today without this?" Mom laughed. "Don't start. It's not that bad. You'll see, it'll be fun." Dad's voice came from the hallway. "Fun? Come on." He muttered jokingly, "You know, Lisa, that they're, well, a little crazy. Don't talk about my relatives like that." My mother immediately protested, but her tone was playful rather than angry. "You're just exaggerating." "I'm not exaggerating," Dad laughed. All right, don't be angry." I heard them hug each other. My mother giggled, and my father whispered something in her ear. At that time, I couldn't even imagine that very soon I wouldn't recognize these two, that they would become strangers. Scary. But then they were my mom and dad. Normal, kind, understandable, and that makes everything much scarier. We drove for about an hour. The car was warm and smelled of tangerines. My mom, subscribe to DeepL Pro to translate larger documents. Visit www.deepl.com/pro for more information. Had put them in a bag on the front seat. Dad turned on the music and sang along. From time to time he joked, "Just don't say I didn't warn you." He muttered to Mom as we pulled onto the highway. "Your relatives, they're strange. Like polar bears, they seem cute, but they can tear your head off." "Shut up." Mom laughed and nudged him gently in the shoulder. "They're all normal." Dad smiled. Well, their jokes seemed mundane, warm, ordinary. It even made me feel somehow comfortable. The journey took almost 3 hours. All that time, the snow fell so thickly that it seemed as if we were driving into a white infinity. I looked at the twisted trees and old houses standing far from the road and thought, this is the real American heartland. We turned off the main road onto some old road. It was almost without asphalt, crunching under the wheels, shaking the car. The air here was different, colder, duller. "I don't like this place," my dad muttered. He really was restless. Not angry, he just sensed something. "Enough," Mom waved her hand. "We're only here for a short visit. We'll stay for a few hours and that's it." "Yeah," Dad said, but his voice was tense. And so, we turned toward that house. That house. I had never seen anything so gloomy. Even though it was 11 in the morning, it was dark there. The windows were fogged up, kind of yellow as if covered with old film. The roof was sagging. The threshold was warped. The House number sign was half collapsed. And this is where the wedding is supposed to be. Maybe we're in the wrong place? I whispered. No, I checked the address. Mom showed her phone. Her face was still joyful. She didn't feel the damp heaviness in the air that was squeezing her chest. Dad sighed. I told you so, he muttered. We went inside, and then I felt cold. Not because the house was cold. It was because all the people, the so-called family, were dressed in black, and they were silent. No one laughed. No one looked happy. Even the bride stood with a stony face, looking somewhere past us. Hello, Mom spoke first. We're here. Her voice sounded so bright against the backdrop of this silence that it even seemed inappropriate. A gloomy aunt in a long black dress approached us. Oh, she smiled with the corners of her lips. You've come. That's good. We are very happy, said Mom. She was the only living person in that room. I stood behind her and felt a very bad premonition rising somewhere in my chest. I looked at the people. They were all strange. Their eyes were dull as if dried up. Their gazes were directed at the floor or at us, but somehow through. No one spoke. I had seen what funerals looked like in movies, and this was exactly that kind of mood. Funeral, but it was supposed to be a wedding day. I saw a guy about my age. He was standing in the corner, as if afraid to approach anyone. I gathered my courage and approached him. Hey, I said, is it always this quiet here? Well, how are you going to celebrate? The guy slowly looked up at me. His eyes were empty. It was as if something important had been taken from him. Celebrate? He repeated quietly. Well, yes, it's a wedding, I said. The guy shuddered. We don't celebrate anything, he whispered. It's not our way. What do you mean? I almost laughed, thinking he was joking, but he wasn't joking. They don't celebrate here, he added more quietly and walked away. I froze. I felt really uncomfortable. I went over to my mom. I feel sick, I whispered. My stomach hurts a lot. It really started to hurt from fear. Oh, poor thing. Mom immediately stroked my back. She was still the same, kind and gentle. Wanted to cry because of what would happen to her next. Maybe we should go, she said quietly to Dad. Dad breathed a sigh of relief. That's what I was waiting for. We approached the exit when suddenly a woman blocked our way. Tall, thin, with a sharp face and thin lips. Where are you going? Her voice was cold and strangely hoarse. We already said goodbye, said Mom vaguely and guiltily. No, said the woman, grabbing Mom's hand. You haven't said goodbye. But, Mom began. The woman pulled her back into the house so sharply that Mom almost cried out. Hey, Dad took a step forward. Take it easy. Stay here, said the woman, without even looking at him. And she and Mom disappeared into the dark hallway. Dad stood there, pale. Get in the car, he said to me. And you? I'm waiting. We sat down. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 15. Dad started tapping his fingers nervously on the steering wheel. No. Enough. He abruptly opened the door. I'll take her. And he went into the house. I was left alone. I don't know how much time passed, half an hour. An hour. I sat alone in the dark car in front of that scary house and felt the cold tightening my throat. It was so quiet that I could hear my pulse. I wanted to follow them, but something held me back. I had a feeling that I should stay in the CAR if I wanted to survive. The door suddenly opened. It was Dad, and Mom was behind him, but they weren't themselves. There was something new in there, as cold, underground, alien. Mom smiled somewhat tensely. "Let's go, sweetie," she said in a thin voice. Dad closed the door. "Yes," he said, but his voice was flat. "The party continues." "The rest," I stammered. "In the forest," Dad said, as if he were talking about something obvious. It's a tradition." I was shocked. Mom stared out the window without blinking. I understood. While they were in that house, something very bad had happened to them. We arrived in the forest. There were old wooden gazebos there. No decorations. No lights. Candles burned in glass jars and dimly lit the tables. People sat around them, all dressed in black, like at a funeral. There was food on the tables. Gray, terrible, lamb, potatoes without salt, some kind of slippery white mass, bread that was almost impossible to bite into. "Is it tasty?" Mom whispered with a lifeless smile. "I don't want to," I said quietly. Dad put his cold hand on my shoulder. He said quietly but harshly, "This was no longer this was just a shell." Dad pushed my plate away. Mom didn't react. Dad didn't even scold me. They just stared ahead. Everyone around us sat quietly and motionless. They chewed on stale food as if no one spoke. No one laughed. There was no wedding. There was no music. It were the best food in the world. It just felt like I had accidentally stumbled into something I should not have been there. Something where people had forgotten that they, human beings. When it was all over, Dad said briefly, "Let's go." Mom followed him without looking back. And I knew that even though they were walking beside me, were gone. They had stayed behind in that house. And the whole wedding was just the beginning. Parents. When we returned home that night, it felt like I had walked into a completely different apartment. No, the renovation was the same, the furniture was the same, the colors of the walls hadn't changed, but something was wrong. The air had become thicker, darker, colder. Mom and Dad walked down the hallway silently, slowly, as if underwater. I watched them, not understanding what was happening and why I felt a chill down my spine. When they were around, "Mom?" I asked cautiously. Mom turned sharply toward me. Her eyes were wide, but not with emotion. They were empty inside. It seemed to me that she didn't even recognize me. "Yes, sweetie?" she said in a voice that was too high, too strained. Dad was standing in the hallway, leaning against the wall. He was turning his head as if trying to listen to some sounds that only he could hear. "Can I go to bed?" I said quietly. "Go ahead," Mom said. I went into my room and quietly closed the door. I listened. They were standing in the hallway. They weren't moving. They just stood there and breathed. I curled up under the blanket and tried not to think. But something inside me screamed, "It's not them." But I tried to calm myself down. Maybe they were just tired. Maybe it was the sleepless trip, the stress, the cold. I didn't know then that they would never be the same again. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of cabbage. I never liked stewed cabbage. And here the smell was so strong and sour that I almost threw up. I went into the kitchen. Mom was standing at the stove. She was cutting cabbage with a dull knife, chop, 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 as if stretching the sound to infinity. Another pot was boiling on the stove. It was bubbling, but the smell was as if someone had thrown wet newspapers into the water and left them to boil. "Mom!" I pinched my nose with my hand. "What is that?" Mom turned around. There was a drop of water hanging from her chin, but Mom didn't wipe it away. She blinked once, slowly. "It's food," she said. Her voice sounded strange. "But we've never cooked anything like this before." "We will now," she said, and turned back to the pot. "Can I have something else? Toast, scrambled eggs?" "No, this is healthy." She spoke mechanically, without emotion. Dad was sitting at the table. In front of him was a bowl of the same gray porridge that had been served at the wedding. He ate it slowly, chewing so monotonously that I could barely keep back my nausea. "Dad?" I whispered. Dad didn't answer. He just swallowed. The spoon scraped against the bowl. "Brrr. Dad?" He suddenly raised his head, his eyes fixed on me. "What?" he barked. Recoiled. It wasn't Dad's voice. It was pressure, anger, hatred, and nothing, I whispered. He stared for a moment until I lowered my eyes. Then he continued eating. It was only the first morning of my new life. Snow was falling outside the window in large flakes. I sat on the sofa in the living room and tried to pretend that everything was fine. I had my phone in my hands. I wanted to text my friend and tell him about the awkward situation we had experienced yesterday. But my mom came up and snatched the phone out of my hands. "Hey!" I exclaimed. "Why?" "Don't sit on your phone," she said quietly but sharply. "It's bad for you." "Mom, vacation is coming soon. Let me play." "And oh," she said louder, "you have to stay with us." "What are we going to do?" "There's a lot to do," said Mom, her voice getting even lower. "What?" I asked. Mom didn't answer. She just left the room with my phone. I wanted to run after her, but Dad, who was sitting on the floor staring at one spot, said, "Sit down." But I said sit down, and Dad didn't even blink. Sat down. My head started to ache. I woke up to someone shaking my shoulder. I opened my eyes. It was Dad. His face was leaning very close, right above mine. "Get up," he said monotonously. "Why? Get up." I got up, my heart pounding. He led me to the kitchen. On the table was a plate with the same gray porridge. "Eat." "I don't want to." "Eat." His voice was stern and cold. I sit down. I tried one spoonful. It wasn't just tasteless. It was like it was dead. No salt, no smell. Just a sticky mass that made me feel sick. "Can I have a little sugar?" "No." "Mom?" I looked at her. "Mom, well," she stood there, staring out the window. She didn't even hear me. No phone, no computer. Dad said it was breaking his brain and took it away to donate it. The money that was in Mom's wallet was gone. The car keys were gone. And the car itself, we left in the morning and she was gone. "Where's the car?" I shouted. Mom turned around slowly, as if she didn't care. "We gave it away," she said. "To whom?" "To those who need it more than we do." Dad added, "When you serve, you have to make sacrifices." "Who are you serving?" I shouted. "Are you out of your minds?" Dad took a step toward me. "Repeat that again?" He croaked. I fell silent. My chest tightened so much that I couldn't breathe. I tried to talk to my mother. "Mom, what's going on with you?" Mom was standing at the stove, stirring her sauerkraut. "Everything's fine," she said. "We've just become more righteous." "Why are you yelling? Why are you afraid of me?" "We're not afraid of you. You're just disobedient." And at the wedding, there was something strange. She turned around sharply. "Don't talk about it," she shouted. Her voice was sharp as a blow. I was scared. "Okay, I'll be quiet." Mom fell silent. I slowly returned to the pot and continued stirring. The apartment was getting dirtier and dirtier. Mom stopped cleaning. She just sat in the kitchen for hours, stirring pots or cutting vegetables, that no one ate except them. Dad was always gone. He would leave in the morning. He would return at midnight or later. His eyes were red, with bruises under them. He smelled of smoke and earth. I didn't know where he was. One evening, he came up to me and said, "We have rules, and you will follow them." What rules? Silence, obedience, sacrifice. What? Dad leaned toward me. "If I see a phone, I destroy it. So you took it away. If I hear complaints, I punish." For what? For disobedience. I took a step back. Dad raised his hand. I froze. "But I won't hit you," he said quietly. "Not until you force me to." And his hand slowly dropped. This wasn't my dad. It was a predator in my dad's body. The money in the kitchen was completely gone. In the refrigerator, there was only cabbage, gray porridge, and water. The bag of tangerines from the car had also disappeared. Mom said, "Fruit is a luxury." But why? Because that's right. I didn't ask for any more explanations. I knew there weren't any. I heard my parents arguing for the first time in all this time. "We need more stock contributions," Dad said. His voice wasn't just angry. It was fanatical. "He can't give so much." Mom seemed to be begging, but her voice was muffled. "We've already given away our savings, the car, the appliances. It's not enough. We can't give any more. We have Tio." I could hear something falling. I sat in my room and trembled. Felt like I was going crazy. Dad came into my room. "Get up." "Why? Get up." I jumped up. He went to the closet and started rummaging around in it. "What are you doing?" "Where's the laptop?" "You took it. And the phone." "Mom has it." "What about the other things? The songs? The purchases? What are you hiding?" "Nothing." I almost shouted. "You and Mom took everything I had." Dad turned around sharply and swung his arm. I saw his fist a centimeter from my face. He didn't hit me. His fist hung in the air, trembling. "You're provoking me," he hissed. "You're just provoking me." He left. I fell onto the bed and started to choke. Didn't know what to do. I was afraid to call anyone. I simply didn't have a phone. I was afraid to go to my neighbors. My father could have killed me for that. I was afraid of everything. I couldn't take it anymore. When my mother was cooking her cabbage and my father was sitting in the kitchen with a blank stare, I plucked up my courage and said, "Can I go to Grandma's?" My mother looked up. For a second, something flashed in her eyes. Something human. And then it disappeared. "Why do you want to?" "I want to. Emis here." "Don't make things up," she said coldly. "You have to stay here." "But I want to see her." Dad came back. "What are you talking about?" "He wants to go to Grandma's," Mom replied. Mechanically, Dad took a step toward me. "Why?" he asked. I missed her." "No." Dad shook his head. "You're not going anywhere." "Why?" "Because that's how it has to be." "But," Dad suddenly raised his hand, as if he wanted to hit me again. "Don't argue." His voice wasn't just angry. It was fanatical, possessed. Something inside me broke. I realized that if I didn't escape now, I wouldn't survive. For the first time in my life, I thought that if I stayed here, I might not live to see spring. And that night, I decided to do the only thing that could save me. I decided to run away to my grandmother's. The night I first seriously decided to run away was the darkest night of my life. So dark that it seemed as if the sky had gone out completely and no one would ever light it up again. I lay under the blanket, pretending to be asleep. I could hear my parents walking in the hallway, slowly, quietly, like ghosts. And with each step they took, I felt a chill run through me. I waited for the moment when everything in the house would fall silent, when thoughts of escape would cease to be just a dream. I waited for the night when I could save myself. But time passed. First it was 10 p.m., then 11:15 p.m., then 12:40 a.m., and they didn't go to bed. Mom quietly walked from the kitchen to the hallway, whispering something to herself. Dad sat on the floor in the living room, staring at one spot. There was something empty about him. It was as if he had given part of himself to someone else. I waited, and finally fell asleep from exhaustion. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of that same stale porridge. So nauseating, so lifeless, it seemed to confirm that the horror was still going on. Mom was standing over the pot. Her hands moved mechanically, as if she were mixing not food, but pieces of some ritual. "Mom, can I go to Grandma's?" I asked in the morning before Dad came into the kitchen. Mom didn't move. The spoon in her hand froze. She slowly turned her head toward me. "Why?" she asked in an unnaturally even voice. Because I miss her, and it's easier for me there. I want to be with her." Mom tilted her head to the side, sharply, like a bird. "Grandma, not that person. She's not with us." "But which us?" "Mom, what are you talking about?" Mom's shoulders jerked. "We are all part of it," she said. Her eyes were like glass. I didn't understand what that meant, but I knew one thing: she wouldn't let me again. And then I said, "I feel sick. I feel nauseous. Can you let me go? Just for a day? Just for one day?" Mom closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was something softer there. For a second, I saw my real mother, the one who hugged me after my nightmares, the one who bought me cocoa, the one who was all right. She whispered, "But you mustn't say anything. Nothing. I promise. No one must know. Okay, I'll let you go." She whispered even more quietly, "But this is a secret. Understand?" Nodded. Mom snapped out of her trance and grabbed her head as if she were dizzy. "Just quickly," she whispered. "Quickly, before he sees." And she gave me a few dollars, not much, but enough for the bus. I quietly got dressed and quickly left. I didn't look back. I was afraid that if I looked back, they would be standing at the window, watching. I walked quickly, as if someone were chasing me. The bus stop was 3 blocks away. The snow crunched under my feet. The cold dried the air to crystal. When I got to the stop and saw the bus, I almost cried. Such relief. It felt as if something had finally opened up in my lungs, allowing me to breathe. I bought a ticket. I sat down. I leaned my head against the cold glass, and for the first time in many days, I began to breathe normally. When the bus left the city, I felt weakness throughout my body. It was as if something inside me had softened, relaxed, allowing me to be myself at least a little. I imagined my grandmother, her warm voice, her pies, her kind smile. She will save me, I thought. I was convinced that only she could help me. When I stepped outside in the village, I was enveloped by the smell of wood and frost. The snow here was thicker and lighter in color. The silence was different, real, not as oppressive as in my parents' apartment. I went into the house. My grandmother was sitting in the kitchen, peeling carrots. When she saw me, her eyes immediately filled with warmth. "My God, what are you doing here?" she exclaimed and hugged me so tightly, as if she was afraid I would disappear. You're so cold. Come in, child. And I lost all my strength. Literally fell into her arms. Grandma, I whispered, I want to eat. Haven't you eaten? Her voice immediately changed, alarm, fear. What happened? She put warm soup, bread, butter, and tea on the table. I pounced on the food as if I hadn't eaten in a week. What's wrong with you? Grandma sat down opposite me and looked at me with fear. What did they do to you? And then I couldn't take it anymore. I told her everything about the wedding, about that house, about the boy who said they weren't celebrating anything, about the woman who dragged my mother into a dark corridor, about how Dad and Mom had changed, how they took away the phone, how they yelled, how I was afraid to even breathe. Grandma listened silently, but her hands were shaking. When I finished, she got up. She went into another room and closed the door. I heard her calling someone. Are you crazy? She shouted. What have you done to the child? Then silence. Then again. And oh, I know everything. I always knew that something was wrong with that family. It's a cult. Do you hear me? A cult. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't think it was this bad. I sat in the hallway, cowering, listening to fragments of confused, angry words. A few minutes later, my grandmother returned, pale and exhausted. She took a pill and sat down next to me. It's okay, she said, but her voice was trembling. You're here now, with me. I won't let them take you away. I nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I felt safe, although the safety didn't last long. 30 minutes passed. Suddenly, there was a loud banging on the door, roughly, hard, so hard that the whole house shook. Bang! Grandma turned pale. Is it them? I whispered. Don't go out, she ordered and got up. Grandma, don't open it. I can handle it, she said, but her voice was shaking. The door rattled again from the blows. BAM. Grandma came over and opened it. They were standing in the doorway, Mom and Dad, but they didn't look like people. Their eyes were pale and empty. Their gazes were cold. Their mouths were pressed into a thin line. They smelled damp and cold, as if they had been kept in a basement. Dad didn't even say hello. He immediately pushed Grandma aside so roughly that she fell and cried out. What are you doing? I shouted. Dad turned around at the sound of my voice. And where are you, you bastard? He roared, taking a step toward me. There was no trace of Dad in his voice. It was something else, something evil. I backed away. Grandma grabbed Dad's arm. Don't touch him. He's a child, she shouted. Dad jerked her away with his other hand as if she weighed nothing. Grandma hit the wardrobe and cried out. Mom stood nearby. She didn't move. She just watched. It was like watching a play. Dad grabbed me by the hood and dragged me to the exit. Home, he yelled. Now, I screamed. I hit him with my hands. I begged. Dad, stop. Please, shut up. He squeezed my hood so hard that I couldn't breathe. Grandma rushed at him again, but Dad turned around and, without thinking, punched her in the face. I heard her scream. I heard her fall. Don't touch her, I shouted, tears streaming down my face. Dad grunted. You are no longer to associate with that old. Gotta go. And when you get home, I will teach you a lesson. I didn't recognize him. It was a monster in my father's body. They threw me into the car. Cried the whole way. Mom sat next to me and didn't even look at me. It was as if I wasn't her son, as if she didn't even know me. Dad was breathing heavily. His jaw was clenched. His eyes were fixed ahead, unblinking. I understood they were panicking because I ran away, because I told, because I ruined something. They drove fast, silently, in the dark, as if afraid that someone would catch up with them. When we arrived, Dad didn't even turn off the engine. He opened the door and pulled me out of the back seat as if I were a sack. He dragged me to the apartment, opened the door, and literally threw me inside. I hit the floor. It hurt, but I didn't even scream. I couldn't. My emotions were frozen. Dad closed the door. He came over. He loomed over me. "I showed you kindness," he shouted so loudly that my ears rang. "I was patient, didn't touch you, and you ran away." He grabbed me by the shirt. "You went against us. I just wanted. I don't care what you wanted." Mom stood behind him. She just watched. Her eyes were empty. She didn't move. He swung his arm. I saw his hand rise, his fingers clench into a fist. But Dad didn't hit him. His fist fell next to my face onto the floor. "I don't hit children," he said quietly, "but I can teach them." He picked me up and dragged me down the hallway to his room. "You'll sit here," he hissed. "Think about it." And he threw me into a dark room. I fell. It was hard to breathe. Dad locked the door. "Until you repent, you won't get out," he shouted from behind the door. "You won't get out." Then footsteps could be heard receding. Quiet but heavy. Darkness. Slow, thick, viscous, so thick it seemed alive. And I was in the middle of it, on the floor of my parents' bedroom, locked in with no chance of escape. For the first few minutes, I just lay there trying to breathe. My chest was tight with pain and panic. My ears were ringing as if someone were hitting my skull with a hammer. I was so scared that I couldn't even cry. My eyes were dry. My throat was constricted. My whole body felt like stone. I heard my father muttering something under his breath behind the door. The words were unclear, but the rhythm was repetitive and monotonous, like a spell. Then there was silence. Then I heard his heavy footsteps receding into the hallway. Then there was a dull thud, as if someone had dropped something heavy on the floor. I wanted to scream, "Grandma, take me away from here," but I just quietly swallowed the air that smelled of dust and fear. 20 minutes passed, or maybe an hour. Time blurred. I found the bed in the dark and sat down on it. My knees were shaking. My fingers were so cold, it felt like they were frozen. Thoughts raced through my head. They're crazy. They're not my parents. They're not human. I have to run away. But the door was locked. The windows were barred with a small metal frame. My father had installed it a year ago when someone broke into the neighbor's house. But now I understood. He probably did it for a reason. I heard snippets of their conversation in the other room. First, my mother's voice, quiet, steady, monotonous. Then my dad's, hoarse and sharp, and another voice. Strangers, a man's. He spoke softly, drawing out his words as if savoring each one. Recognized that voice immediately. The same man I saw at the wedding, the bride's father. He looked at me, then as if he were evaluating me. Now he was in our apartment. My heart stopped for a second. They brought him here because of me. I thought. The doorknob jerked. I flinched, ready for anything. But the door didn't open. Someone just whispered from behind the door, "Think about it. It's for your own good." My mother's voice, cold, empty. Then their footsteps receding into the kitchen. Silence enveloped the room again, and then it began. There was a pungent smell, like old metal and rancid fat. The smell came from the kitchen. I heard the clatter of cups hissing, the sloshing of thick liquid. Strange man was saying something. Don't worry, he'll be with us soon. The words were spoken so casually, as if he were offering tea. Dad replied quietly, but with a firm, fanatical tone. He has to. Otherwise, he won't be your child. The man finished calmly. Do you really want to lose that? Mom laughed nervously, but it wasn't her laugh. It was a short, rattling sound that barely resembled a human voice. I sat leaning against the wall, listening to every word, because now my whole life depended on these fragments. A few minutes later, Dad shouted, "Come here." I flinched. He didn't even try to sound gentle. It wasn't a request. It was an order. Didn't move. The door opened abruptly, and the light from the hallway hit my eyes. "Get out," Dad said. I went. They led me to the kitchen like cattle to slaughter. The same man was sitting in the kitchen. His gaze slid over me slowly and sweetly, like a snake's tongue. There was a mug on the table, old, metal, slightly rusty, and in something thick and red. The liquid glistened. Gray, fatty pieces floated in it, and on the surface there was a thin film like mold. The smell hit my nostrils so hard that I felt nauseous. The old man smiled. "Here," he said, pushing the mug toward me. "Drink up." His voice was soft. It was as if he were offering me cocoa. I froze, couldn't even breathe. Mom spoke quietly, but her voice trembled with fanatical tension. "Drink. You have to be like us." "No, he will be," added Dad, clenching his fists. "If he doesn't want to, voluntarily, we'll teach him." I looked at that mug, and only one thought ran through my head. This isn't just a drink. It's something ritualistic. This is what made them who they are. I whispered, "Did you drink it too?" Mom didn't even think twice. She immediately replied, "Yes, and it's very tasty." Her lips trembled. Her eyes shone as if she were speaking with someone else's voice. "And you'll drink it. You're not going anywhere." The words cut me like knives. I took a step back, then another. Dad took a step forward. "Are you trying to run away?" He roared so loudly that the walls shook. And then I lunged. I rushed to the front door with all my strength. Ran as if death were chasing me. Dad shouted, "You bastard!" I almost grabbed the handle, but I was too late. Dad grabbed me by the shoulder with one hand and pulled me so hard that I almost broke my neck. His fingers squeezed me like a vice. He slammed his palm against the wall next to my head. Hard. It hurt. The plaster crumbled. "You are too young to behave like this," he exclaimed. "We will correct you." The uncle watched with the indifferent gaze of a teacher observing discipline in the classroom. "Don't make him suffer too much," he said, getting up. "He'll be useful yet." Then he added more quietly, "If he's obedient." And he walked to the exit without looking back. The door closed behind him. Dad pulled me up from the floor and dragged me down the hallway. "You will drink this," he hissed, "or you won't leave here." His voice was hoarse, like a madman's. He opened the door to my room, literally threw me on the floor, and yelled, "You won't leave until you drink this." And he put the glass by the door. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Silence fell on me like a blanket of stones. He said, in the dark. My hands were shaking, my shoulders, even my toes. I could feel the skin on my face burning from the blows and fear. The words of my uncle, mom, and dad spun around in my head. You have to be like us. Drink up. Otherwise, you won't be our child. We'll fix you. I tried to hold on, but the fear inside me was alive, crept into my throat, my chest, my heart. Paralyzed me. I thought and thought and thought, how could I escape? The window wouldn't open, it was locked from the outside. The door was locked. I sat there for so long that I lost feeling in my legs. The darkness merged with my fear into a single whole. Around midnight, I heard the first sound, a rustle, light as if someone was running their finger along the wallpaper. I froze. The rustling repeated itself, closer, and again. I thought it was my imagination, maybe a mouse, maybe the wind in the ventilation, but no, it was footsteps, quiet, careful. 2 people. I heard whispering. He's not asleep yet. Then it's time, Dad replied. It was quiet in my room. Only the wind whistled through the cracks in the window, when suddenly the door burst open and my mom and Dad rushed in. My heart jumped out of my chest at how abruptly they entered. I jumped up on the bed, almost fell, and whispered, trying to understand what was happening. What? Is something wrong? Mom stood with her head tilted slightly to one side, her hair hanging over her face, her eyes shining with an unnatural gleam, and Dad took a step forward and I heard something broken and hoarse in his breathing, as if he were letting the words pass through someone else's consciousness. And then he spoke in a voice I had never heard before, a voice with an accent of some kind of obsession, monotonous and fanatical. If you don't want to drink the liquid of God, then you are not with us. I was paralyzed, felt like something cold had spilled in my stomach. I looked at them and couldn't believe that these were my parents, that this was my mom and dad who, yesterday, were still laughing and talking about ordinary things. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words stuck, and that's when I saw it. Metal glinting behind my dad's back. A knife, a real one, a kitchen knife, a big one. He was clutching it as if he was going to cut me, not vegetables. Mom took a breath, as if she wanted to add something, but Dad was already rushing at me. With his knife held out in front of him, he ran so fast, as if he couldn't feel his body, as if someone else was moving him. I felt a scream escape from my chest, but I couldn't make out what I was screaming. I didn't even think. I just acted like an animal trying to survive. I rushed forward and slammed my hands against the window, which was only half open. I fell onto the windowsill, braced myself against the metal bars with both hands, and pushed with all my might. The pain was so intense that it felt like I was tearing my fingers off, but the metal gave way and flew out along with a piece of the frame. With one movement, I jumped down. When I fell into the snow, I heard something crack, but my body was so full of adrenaline that I didn't feel anything. I got up, ran, kicking up snow with my feet, slipping but not stopping. Behind me, I heard my father scream, an angry, wild, inhuman scream. I didn't even look back. I ran for several kilometers until my legs gave way. After that, everything was a blur. People found me and called an ambulance. I heard them talking about my arm, bruises, shock. They put me in the car, the world was spinning, everything was blurry. I remember someone in the emergency room asking my name, if I had any relatives, where to call. My parents were taken to a psychiatric clinic almost immediately. The doctors said that their condition was serious, that they were behaving as if they were unconscious. My grandmother arrived that same night, She cried and hugged me as if she wanted to protect me from the whole world with her own hands. She quickly and without argument became my guardian because even social services saw that my parents could not be trusted with any children. A week passed, then another, and it began to seem that everything was behind us, that the horror, just a vivid dream that will fade with time. I was sitting in my grandmother's house, usually shrouded in silence, scrolling through the news feed, just mechanically without thinking like everyone else does. And suddenly, one photo hit me right in the chest. News, the headline in bold. Organizer of closed religious group in the district arrested. I clicked on it, and I almost dropped my phone. On the screen was the face of that same man, the guest who had come to our apartment, the one who stirred that bloody liquid in a mug and said, "Well, drink it." I felt nauseous. The article was long, with photos, video clips, and testimonials from former members. Reading it was like swallowing ice. They wrote that this group had existed for many years, but operated secretly, that those who joined them gave away all their money, all their savings, that because of this they lost their homes, cars, and phones. And finally, everything fell into place like a puzzle. Why our car disappeared, why my mother gave away my phone, why they didn't pay for the apartment, why they had become so angry and fanatical. They were already part of the cult, and their minds were being controlled. The article said that this cult had killed at least 23 people, and I read that sentence several times. 23, and then I thought, if I hadn't jumped out of the window then, if I had hesitated for even a second longer, I would have been the 24th. I was overcome by a chill, not the kind of chill that comes from the wind or snow, the kind that penetrates your skin, your brain, your soul. Real fear. I scrolled further and found the most terrifying thing. Experts wrote that the liquid, the same one they tried to make me drink, consisted of human blood mixed with human fat. But the most frightening thing was the third component, an unknown liquid, a substance they couldn't identify. It affected the brain in such a way that people became completely controllable, like puppets. I closed my eyes and imagined my mother smiling a crazy smile. How my father screamed and lunged at me with a knife. It was no longer them. It was that liquid that controlled their bodies, like someone else's will. I put the phone on the bed and sat silently for a long time. Snowflakes fell outside the window, quiet and slow, as if the world wanted to calm me down. But that knowledge will never leave me. I survived. Barely, but I survived. And I will never forget that evil can live closer than it seems. And that even those you love can become strangers if something like this falls into their hands. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and felt like I could finally just be alive. And that was the most important thing.